The Poco X4 GT might be the most important phone Poco launches all year, but can it finally take the Poco F3's place as the best value Android device? Here are the main takeaways. The X4 GT has much better battery life, faster charging speeds from the included charger, a headphone jack, a 144Hz LCD screen, and a more powerful processor. The F3 has a slightly better camera, IP53 dust and water resistance, a very good AMOLED 120Hz screen, and better carrier compatibility in the States. But which is faster? Both are quite fast for day-to-day use, but the X4 GT is usually just a bit quicker at opening and scrolling through apps, launching games, and navigating the interface. Thankfully, unlocking with the side-mounted fingerprint scanners is excellent on both. Fast performance is what you'd expect from the F3 Snapdragon 870, but finally there's a newer chip that can beat the 870 at a pretty affordable price. The X4 GT's Dimensity 8100 from MediaTek. Both are paired with 8 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM and 128 or 256 gigs of speedy UFS 3.1 storage. There's also a base model of the F3 that ships with 6 gigs of RAM. As far as gaming goes, both phones are more than capable of playing demanding titles like Genshin and Asphalt at medium to high detail settings and frame rates. But the X4 GT can outperform the F3 significantly, especially in games that support its new MediaTek processor. Even in a title like PUBG, the Ultra HD graphics setting will apparently be available soon. I hope as the Dimensity 8100 becomes more popular in different devices, that Poco and game developers will enable the X4 GT's full gaming potential. On benchmarks, it's clear just how much faster the 8100 is compared to the 870. Starting with Geekbench, we see the single core scores nearly tied, but with the F3 barely beating the X4 GT at 938 compared to 908. But the X4 GT's multi-core score of 3671 is a huge improvement over the F3's 3109. 3D Mark Wildlife's gaming test places the X4 GT much further ahead with a score of 5824 compared to the F3's 4240. But does the X4 GT throttle and overheat? Nope, not that I can tell. Here's the CPU throttle test that I ran for 45 minutes, and the F3 throttled to 92% of its peak performance, while the X4 GT throttled 1% lower, but both are still wonderful scores. And of course, the X4 GT is performing a lot better overall. I also ran 3D Mark's Wildlife stress test, and the X4 GT performs just as well here, maintaining a very high score with 88% stability. The Poco F3 just cannot keep up. Both heat up to 43 degrees, but don't feel uncomfortably hot, and the X4 GT uses slightly less battery. So which has the better screen? The Poco F3, unless you really want that 144Hz refresh rate from the X4 GT. The X4 GT uses a 6.6-inch Full HD Plus LCD panel that can run up to a crazy fast 144Hz and looks nice and sharp. It even has a gaming-friendly touch sampling rate of 270Hz, but only when the refresh rate is running at 90Hz or less. I'll go over some more problems with that later in the video. The F3 has a 6.67-inch Full HD Plus AMOLED display that can run at up to 120Hz and has a higher touch sampling rate of 360Hz with no restrictions. As far as I know, they're both protected by Gorilla Glass 5 and are viewable outdoors on a sunny day. But the F3 with its peak brightness of 1300 nits is easily usable, while the dimmer X4 GT's max 650 nit panel is a little bit tougher to see. Fortunately, the X4 GT does get dark enough at night to not blind you while you're scrolling for new cookie recipes in bed. Thank you, DC dimming. What about the cameras? If the F3's cameras are like a 6 out of 10, then the X4 GTs are kind of like a 5. This is another situation where the higher 64 megapixel main camera from the X4 GT is actually a bit worse than the lower pixel count 48 megapixel F3 camera. Both devices really benefit from using a Gcam port instead of the stock camera in a lot of circumstances, besides video. Neither have OIS, and the X4 GT's 4K video looks like it's not even electronically image stabilized, unlike the F3. And if you turn on stabilization, the X4 GT drops down to 1080 at 30 FPS. Both shoot at 1080 from the selfie camera, and here at least I do prefer the X4 GT's footage. With third-party filming apps like Filmic Pro and Motion Cam, the F3 Snapdragon processor seems to benefit from better development support. I've already made a full X4 GT camera test video, which I'll link in the description, but basically if the camera is your deciding factor between these two devices, just get the F3. If this video has been helpful so far, please give it a like. I'd really appreciate it. For audio quality, both phones have stereo speakers and sound fine, but the F3 is a little louder and more full. Amazingly, the X4 GT has a headphone jack, and of course Bluetooth works well on both phones without any dropouts or quality issues. How about the batteries? The X4 GT wins big here, with faster 67-watt charging and a much larger battery at 5080 mAh. The F3's 33-watt charging and 4520 mAh battery takes around 50 minutes to charge from 1% to full, which is the same as the X4 GT, oddly enough. But if you only have 10 to 20 minutes to charge and your battery is less than about 40%, you'll see the X4 GT's faster charger get you further than the F3's. I'm getting about a day and a little more from the F3 on a full charge, but about 2 days from the X4 GT. I tested with the screen running at 144 Hz and the default dynamic refresh rate, and didn't really see much of a difference in battery life, probably because there are so few apps that actually take advantage of the 144 Hz setting. Neither charge wirelessly, but both still include the charger in the box. So what about the software experience? Both phones are running MIUI 12 for Poco, which is Poco's version of Android 12, at least on these devices. It's not my favorite OS, but after using the F3 for more than a year, I'm certainly used to it. It's not as light and easy to use as stock Android from something like the Google Pixel phones, but it works fine most of the time. Just good luck if you're looking for specific features and settings, or you want to use gesture navigation with third-party launchers, or say you simply want a horizontal recent apps menu, like nearly every other mainstream Android phone. I did put together this video to help with 2 of those issues, so feel free to check it out in the video description. But besides that, there are some bugs on the X4 GT that Poco needs to fix, like some notifications that I couldn't swipe away and only managed to remove by rebooting the device. Also, it might just be me, but the X4 GT didn't seem to respond to my touches and swipes as consistently when the refresh rate was set at 144 Hz. Maybe this is due to the touch sampling dropping down with the 144 Hz setting. I went ahead and performed a quick test with a touch sampling rate checker app, and at the default refresh rate, the X4 GT is running at 222 Hz or 250 Hz usually. At the 144 Hz refresh rate, it's bouncing between 142 and 166 Hz, but occasionally way higher, like 333 Hz, and depressingly lower, like 19 Hz. The F3, on the other hand, generally runs at either 333 or 375 Hz. This might just be a me problem, since I haven't seen anyone else report this issue, but I don't seem to have these sensitivity issues with the default refresh rate. Either way, it was a very minor and occasional bug for me. In terms of Android OS updates, you should get 2 years on the X4 GT and 1 more year for the F3, since it already received 1 major OS upgrade. One quick note, if you want to use the X4 GT in the States, you might be out of luck. T-Mobile lists it as incompatible right now, but Mint Mobile, which actually uses T-Mobile's network, says it's compatible. In fact, the Fox says it's Foxtastic, but if fairy tales have taught me anything, it's that you can't trust foxes. So I clicked the question mark here, and of course it's not fully supported. Amazingly, it's only using 1 5G band and 3 4G bands, but it's still voice over LTE compatible. I've only had one time where I lost reception completely, and I was in a more rural area, so overall I'm still pretty happy with it. By the way, the F3 is rock solid and well supported on T-Mobile and many T-Mobile MVNOs. Lastly, the X4 GT is more comfortable to hold since it's a narrower device. It just makes things easier to reach, even though I wish it had rounded edges like the F3. The haptics are also fine on both, with strong, tight vibrations. So is the X4 GT the F3 killer? I would say yes. The only reasons I would suggest anyone pick up the F3 at this point is if it's substantially cheaper, you want a slightly better camera, at least until Poco improves the X4 GT's video performance, or you just have to have that bright AMOLED screen. Now for gamers, users who need a headphone jack, anyone who wants better battery life, or possibly the fastest processor on a budget mid-range device, should go with the X4 GT. Right now in the States, the X4 GT is about $349 US for the 128 gig version, while the F3 can be found for between $300 and $350 for the 6 gig of RAM, 128 gig storage model. Check out my full X4 GT camera review right here, and I'll put my X4 GT versus Pixel 6a comparison right up here when it's ready. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and feel free to comment with any questions you might have, and I will answer them perfectly. Now I say perfectly, but I don't actually mean perfectly. I mean basically